Hey, everybody. Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Reverman.
Dean, have you ever had food poisoning?
Ooh, yeah, yes, I'm sure I have sometime in my life.
Yeah,
Unfortunate when that happens, right?
I had
but I'm still
salmonella.
here. I haven't died. Oh, you had salmonella.
This has been like 20 years or so ago.
Dude, that's serious.
I spent about 3 days in the hospital.
Ooh.
It was not fun.
No.
And even though I don't know for sure where I got it, the last place I ate was I'm not going to mention the name of it, a popular national chain sit-down restaurant. Let's put it that way. And I was a little turned off from eating there,
Right?
for quite some time.
Statistics would say that you probably never went back. Maybe
I actually did. I think at some point eventually, because it was
What,
like
you a glutton for punishment?
Well, it was like the hangout place for me and my friends for a while. There, we were kind
yeah.
of boring and just hang out on
Yeah,
Friday
I
nights
gotcha.
there.
I
and
gotcha,
eat.
yeah.
But I was turned off for a little while.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
admit, and it may not even been the actual place I got it, but it was the last place I ate before that.
Right.
It was just embedded in my mind. Well,
Yeah.
anyway, I bring that up because today's topic of conversation is about food safety.
Yep.
And the technology that can go behind it, which, we talk a lot about, our customers working with, restaurants and hospitality and retail grocers. And I think we focus on a lot of other technologies around, inventory management, POS, maybe back of the house kitchen type stuff.
Yep.
But there's another opportunity that's out there, which is the food safety world and helping
Absolutely.
customers make sure that the food they're serving is safe, that it's fresh, that they're not wasting food. So we have a great guest with us today. We have Ashley Barey from Zebra. She's going to come in with us and talk us a little bit about, innovations around food safety, the great scope of food safety, what it means, what the FDA is recommending, and what their plans are for the future to kind of enforce
Got to pay attention to
safety.
that. Oh, yes.
Exactly.
Yep.
Where technology fits into this. What changed over the last year? COVID changed a lot of things about how food practices are done in general and probably disrupted a lot of food safety practices along the way.
No doubt.
We'll get into some of those key technologies that are going to help us meet those compliances that the FDA is putting out there. Talk about how we might reduce waste. She'll talk a little bit about what Zebra is doing in this market already.
Yep.
We've got some cool
Lots
new
of good
tools
stuff.
and
Oh, yeah.
technologies available, as well as our usual value to the VAR and what's tech connecting with us. So it is
There you
time
go.
to plug in and get connected.
Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. It's time to get connected.
All right. As I mentioned, our guest today, Ashley Barey. Barry, I hope I'm pronouncing Barry correctly. I forgot to ask you at the beginning of the show like I normally do.
No, you are.
All right, good.
That's perfect.
Just
the way it's spelled.
Good. She is I'm usually right about these things, but I always like to make sure. She is the Director of Strategic Development and works on the Temp Time project at Zebra. So Ashley, tell us a little bit more about yourself, how you ended up at Zebra, and maybe what your day-to-day role does look like.
Absolutely. So my name is Ashley Barey, as I've been mentioned. My background is actually in supply chain. I came from Blue Yonder, or JDA, as some of you may have known, for 5 or 6 years in the software world. I worked a lot on data and bringing transportation, warehouse systems all together. It's the first time that I also worked on the IBM Food Trust and lots of different information and traceability of food throughout many large retailers, all the way back to the suppliers. And now I work for Zebra, and I worked in our data solutions area, so Zebra Savannah, and now Temp Time, which is we specialize in improving global health, but we look at temperature indication throughout food, pharma, chemicals, anything that you need to make sure is staying at the right temperature throughout the supply chain.
Awesome.
And as we've talked about, that is an area of growth for resellers that are listening to us today. I'm telling you, whatever you want to call it, IoT or whatever, just the expansion of sensors and stuff like that. I don't know if we'll get into the temp time stuff, but man, that stuff's cool too.
Yeah.
That Zebra's doing. But yeah.
Definitely. Well, we thank you very much for being here with us today and diving into this topic. This is one that's kind of interesting to me because I feel like it's one of those topics that, again, as I mentioned, we may not think about it as often as we should when we are dealing with customers where this is going to be relevant. It feels like something where like, yeah, everybody knows that they need to keep their food fresh and safe and the right temperatures and not spoil or not waste stuff if they can. But, there is a technology element that can be embedded in there to help them do that. And I think it's important that we, again, put these opportunities out there for them and help them understand of what's coming down the pike to know where there might be opportunities in the near to distant future.
Absolutely.
So first I want to start off let's talk about the importance of food food safety. And as we talked at the top of the show, I've had, food poisoning. I know what that's like. It's awful. It's a huge turnoff. I make sure I studiously sniff everything that I'm preparing or eating.
As if that's some type of.
As if that really makes a big difference. But, obviously if it smells bad, you definitely don't eat it. But, I'm very cautious and careful about this stuff, in a way that I never used to be before.
Yeah.
I was telling Ashley before we came on that I worked for a food service, supplies company before I came to BlueStar, and we there was a lot of stuff around food safety and keeping everything clean involved in that I had never even understood or realized before. If you've worked, I'm sure in
a restaurant or something,
this stuff, right?
Absolutely.
But there's definitely a lot there that I didn't realize. And as I was researching for this episode, I came across some very terrifying statistics, frankly, and some amazing ones too. So unsafe food leads to 600 million, that's 1 in 10 people falling ill, and 420,000 deaths every year. That's across the world in general. In the U.S., it's about 1 in 6 Americans, 48 million that get sick yearly, averaging to about 3,000 deaths. So those are, kind of alarming statistics. I know it's,
Well, let's marinate on that for just 1 second. We're worse than the world average, right? So 1 in 10 worldwide, but 1 in 6 Americans are going, what is going on here?
That's for a country, again, that's supposed to be so much further above.
Right.
But, there's some shortcuts that are being taken there. So, and obviously, the food allergies is a big concern, has been a concern for a while too, about making sure that people know what's in the food that they're eating, that they know what ingredients are there. If someone has an allergy to something, one of those things I feel like we didn't pay as much attention to 20, 30 years ago.
Not at all.
But has become much more relevant. And granted, I think from what I understand over time, food sensitivities have become a stronger thing than they used to be too. So again, it all wraps up in this picture of making sure that our food is safe, making sure that people know what's in their food, that they can feel comfortable with what they're eating or what they're buying. Ashley, you had a great example, I think, to kind of help us explain why we need to be concerned about this and why it's more than just the basics of, sure, ice cream needs to stay frozen, or chicken shouldn't be left out on the counter for 3 hours or something before you cook it. So help us understand why this is relevant and important.
Absolutely. I use an example around one of my favorite kinds of food, which is Velveeta, because you put that on nachos and you can use it for so many different things. But it really helps to show and help people think about the fact that it's not just a strawberry, for example, and this could be manufactured food, it could be prepared food, it could be all sorts of different things, and each of them has a different, what we call a stability profile. And that means, what is the temperature it has to stay in between, right? And most people think, well, Velveeta, I buy it off the shelf, right? That doesn't, that's not really temperature. And it is. Room temperature is still a temperature. So Velveeta could be frozen, so it's in its truck, and the truck is going down the road in Minnesota, and it's really cold, and it can be frozen, and then you can still sell it on the shelf. But if that truck maybe is going through a really hot day in Texas and hasn't been appropriately protected, or isn't being measured, what's going on with that truck, and we measure a lot with trucks, what trucks are doing, it could melt. So suddenly we have wasted all that entire pallet of Velveeta. It's melty cheese everywhere, and there's no nacho chips to be found, and you can't do anything with it but clean it up, right? So that's a great example of just something that's room temperature. Cereal, anything that can be affected by those very low or very high temperatures, you always want to monitor those. And the more you get into things like our friend the strawberry, the more sensitive those kind of foods are. So the strawberry is not just sensitive to the temperature, it's also sensitive to humidity. And in fact, humidity will affect it even more than just the temperature, right? If it gets wet and isn't able to dry out, or if it dries out too far, then you don't really want to eat like a dried up, strawberry. So these are all those environmental sensing is affecting all of those different things that we talked about, like foodborne illness and anything else. All of that is all regulated, but it's not just the temperature, and it's not just those things that you think of as being temperature oriented.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
And this kind of plays a little bit into the fact that, I was doing a little bit of research coming into this. You have to think about the business side of it too. I think we've done a good job here of kind of laying the foundation of why food safety is important. But when you think about it, I mean, there's a business impact anytime there is an incident. I'm still surprised
Absolutely.
that Chipotle, I guess, is still in business, because I don't want to call them out, but they have had a couple incidents.
had some issues for a while there.
You know, but still, I mean, you know, it has a negative impact on the business. So when you think about it from our perspective and the resellers that we deal with, their customers, right? A lot of them are obviously in this business. It's important to understand that food safety is critical to their customers' ongoing viability, right? The stat that I was looking at, 60% of people that visit a restaurant where there was, you know, came into contact with a foodborne illness or something like that will never go back to that place again. So, you know, which makes sense, right? I mean, it's so there's the business.
Unless you're me,
for it
apparently.
too.
So.
Well, no, you're in the 40% that would go back. So
I think it was like a year, maybe. So
right. But it is important, right? So it's critical. The importance is definitely there.
Yeah, I definitely would say so. Well, and I liked also, Ashley, you mentioned the idea of, which again is something I don't think as a consumer we think about, and probably sometimes as the businesses themselves may not think about, is this idea that, hey, just because something is storable at room temperature doesn't make it just, you know, any old situation. You know, it doesn't mean like you take it into a room that has no air conditioning, that's no longer sufficient room temperature at that point, you know, or as you mentioned, if you're transporting it through a place that's hot or excessively cold, you're disrupting that in some way. And again, that's not something I think that a lot of people ever really think about. You know, just because something is storable at room temperature doesn't mean that it's just, you know, for any temperature that it's acceptable.
Well, and we've had kind of conversations about supply chain and obviously how our resellers are getting more and more ingrained deeper and deeper into supply chain and traceability. I know we're focusing on food safety here today, but, you know, the traceability need there is a need, and there's technology that can help people along that way that we need to all be kind of cognizant of. But if you're a solution seller, you're having those conversations. You're understanding, you know, what is the input of the manufacturing process in this case food look like? What are the storage temperatures that these things need to stay at, or once they're produced, what do they need to stay at, right? Ashley, I know that you get into that a lot in what you're doing, right? Helping people navigate that and helping resellers understand the importance of that. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the two things that you picked up on, I'd love to talk about in terms of what the resellers can be thinking about too, is one is that quality and brand protection, right? So even beyond just understanding that something is safe, right? And just because something has been kept at the appropriate temperature does not necessarily mean it's safe. There's lots of FDA rules and all sorts of other things that come into play there. So lots of ways you can have that quality conversation with your end customer, right? How do they know that the goods that they're getting from their suppliers are coming into those distribution centers and have been kept at the appropriate temperature or haven't been shocked or anything like that? How do we help them to think about the quality? Because the consumer is usually more suspicious than anything else, right? So even if you say, yes, that's safe, they may say, no, I'm going to question that, and I want proof of that. I want to understand what it is that the brands are doing to protect me, or what are the brands doing to provide higher quality and better visibility to their customers about all of those systems. That's, I think, one of the great parts of this conversation today is that we get to think about that. And again, different ways to have that conversation where it's not just the stick of the FDA, it's not just the threat, but it's also that thought of quality and the fact that consumers expect more at this point, especially with all the trends that have gone way high since COVID, because everybody is now getting delivery food. They're all getting, you know, all sorts of things through the mail. They're getting all of these different, you know, like HelloFresh. They're getting their groceries put together by other people. They're changing hands a lot. How do I make sure that I'm protected? And how do I make sure that I have visibility from, you know, farm to fork, essentially?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we've all become kind of sensitive to that. I had a delivery just the other night, and I noticed the fact that the restaurant took great care to make sure the bag was sealed and it had the label on it, all that. Right. Absolutely buttoned up, and you felt comfortable that, hey, this is about as clean of a delivery as it possibly can. Right. The food that came to you. Ashley, I want to also throw another thing on the table here, and I hope I'm not throwing you a curveball here, but as I was thinking about this particular episode, I was thinking about what's unique about food safety to me, at least here in the U.S. You hear a lot about local growers and hyper-localism around, food, the input side, restaurants going out and working with local farmers and stuff like that. And again, as solution providers, we need to be cognizant of that and have solutions available that maybe your end user who's a restaurant needs to have a solution where they can kind of track, where some of that information or where some of those goods are coming from, right? I mean, are you starting to see it on the hyper and the local sense too, the need for these solutions?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the more recent projects that I worked on was actually a local butcher. It was a local meat provider, and that's obviously very on trend, right? So it's local grass-fed beef, and what they're doing is that they were working with their distributor, right? So they were considered a supplier. They were working with the distributor. The distributors, in fact, were the ones who were saying, we have to make sure that all of these rules and regulations are being applied. We're going to help you, right? So in terms of like value-added resellers, like going to work with those distributors so they can and educate them so they can work with the suppliers to get these tools and to understand what it's like, so that the traceability is able to be done. And also, again, all of those different rules and regulations are being expressed appropriately. So supporting them in well, you could use a data logger, you could use an indication tag, that's something more chemical, you could use this mitigation plan, you could use an RFID tag so we understand the location of these things. So there's all these different technologies, and it's great when the suppliers and the distributors can work together more seamlessly, so that they can provide that. And then it's also uniform so that the distributors are really comfortable with all the different suppliers that are coming in. That way, when I buy something, right, if I'm buying something from my local co-op, like I can even see what they've done with all of these different suppliers to ensure, again, quality and safety for me.
Bingo. I think the opportunity is there. It is a trend in our society. It's not going away. Yep. I mean, I love the fact that I could walk into, a co-op or a local, whatever, even Walmart.
Very local.
Even Walmart does localized stuff, and to see that, this came from a farm in wherever 15 miles away, that's awesome. But as long as they're following the, I would expect that there would be some traceability behind that, and maybe it's not there today, but there's some opportunities there for resellers, I think.
Well, since we keep talking about traceability, and Ashley, you mentioned kind of some of the FDA's guidelines earlier. Obviously, there's been this increased emphasis on taking stock of all of this and keeping track of all of it. And the FDA has recently kind of unveiled a plan, kind of this proposed rule called the FSMA for food traceability. It just came out in September of 2020 last year. So tell us a little bit more about this. It's it's like a 55-page document, which you don't want to necessarily.
A 55-page government document.
Which, honestly, it feels short for a government document. Let's be honest. So, but Ashley, can you walk us through a little bit about what this means? What they're really talking about with traceability. What are their expectations, and more importantly, what does this mean for potential opportunities in the near or, even distant future for our resellers that are thinking about, hey, how's this going to impact things on the technology side?
Yeah, absolutely. So what the FDA has introduced is there's 4 core elements to this plan. And as many of the folks probably listening to this know, is that the FDA typically rolls out a plan and it takes them a while, right? They go out and ask a lot of questions. They deal with big vendors, they deal with big technology companies, they kind of understand what it is. And it takes them a while to figure out where there could be mandates or changes. So what they've put together is this new era blueprint. It has, 4 core elements around it. And there's a cultural element to it. There's a smarter tools element to it. There is a technology element to it. And then there's a new business model area to it. And you may have just heard us talk about elements of all 4 of those new business models. So thinking of all of those delivery foods and all of those prepackaged meals that are now coming to people. Traceability. So to go a little techie, right? So there's a group, the GS1 group, and many of you know them because if you're into barcodes, and they generate all those food barcodes, right? They give you all of that traceability about what the product is and a lot of the even ways to identify the ingredients and things like that. How are we leveraging GS1 and other of these large information aggregators to help us with traceability? It's always been the issue of, well, if I own farm to fork, I know the traceability, right? But if I don't, again, as a large retailer, or even as a medium or small retailer, how do I get all that data to come together, right? How do we aggregate it all so that we can see each of those transactions? So that's a big pillar. So, right, these new business models are pushing all this traceability and pushing all these new ways that people are getting food The second piece is that we're looking to see the combination of all of that data and how does that help us, right? It's helped us quite a bit in the past in terms of the ingredient identification. How do we keep pushing that forward? And then the other, aspects of it are really cultural, which you've identified kind of at the top of the hour here, which is more and more consumers are concerned, with their quality and safety. How are we pushing that into our industry? One of the great things is that there was an article that talked about 70% of decision makers think that the food traceability that we're good, we can manage it all. But only 35% of the consumers actually agreed to that. So these pillars that have been set up are really responding to that, is that consumers are really, they're concerned, they're not necessarily trusting that industry. How do we push that more and more? And how does the government help to do that?
Yeah, there is a little bit of a gap there between what the industry thinks is possible.
And that's fairly typical, right? Even in medicine and pharma, you see that too, where consumers are said, well, I'm still skeptical of what you think that does, right? And the FDA and all the communities usually come back and try to respond to that. So I am excited by the new era blueprint. I think it's going to be a tremendous thing for the technology companies as well as huge opportunity for us to all be able to come forward with new innovations, but also just the implementation of a lot of existing technologies like RFID and barcodes and 2D barcodes, 1D barcodes, et cetera.
Absolutely. And that's why I think this episode is so critical, because there are some opportunities coming down the field, right? So, Ashley, we were talking a little bit before we got on here. So this is right now it's a guideline, or what do they call it?
Evolution in data logging.
What's that?
It's a blueprint. The new era
blueprint. Right. Yes, exactly. Right. But it's not a law yet, right? So, but No,
not at all.
Yeah, right. So, but there's going to be some opportunity coming down the line, and I was reading a little bit more into some of the, the nuance, if you will, of what they're trying to develop here. And there are a couple of things that I think are worth talking about. I'll just read from here. 2 pillars of the proposed rule, so it's a proposed rule, are key data elements and critical tracking elements. So what they call KDEs and CTEs, as if we need more acronyms in this business. But those are 2 that I think our resellers need to become aware of, because those seem to be the driving elements around this. So key data elements are just that, tracking the data of whatever is going through its life cycle, on points. And then tracking events would be, it went from here to here. It went from here to here. So we're tracking these elements. So that's going to be data, as Ashley was talking about. As with everything that we're involved in, it's creating even more data that needs to be massaged and analyzed and things like that. But KDEs and CTEs are going to be pillars that will be
those will be on the quiz later, folks.
Those will be on the quiz later, right? Because when you're having a conversation about it, that's what people are going to start talking about. Yep. Oh, is this a KDE or is it a CTE? Right. Exactly. So
I like the idea that we're talking about the cultural side of this too, because cultural trends in food consumption have been a big push as far as why we are being so diligent about paying attention to what's in our food. Whether it is food sensitivities like we talked about before, whether it is just making sure you don't get sick, or fad diets even. When somebody's on a specific type of diet, maybe you're counting carbs and you want to make sure that you always know. And let's be honest, if you decide to go out to a restaurant, that's easier said than done. I mean, I know like a lot of the fast food retailers, they've come around or been mandated to, provide that information somewhere that's easily, accessible. But if you go to a local restaurant, that may not be as easy.
Yeah.
So even stuff like that could, where you could maybe help out your local restaurants and help them like, hey, do you have a lot of customers that are always coming in and asking you how much of X, Y, or Z is in this? Or did this food come from a locally sourced farm? Or, if that kind of questions are coming up, this is the kind of stuff that can help them narrow that down and help them bridge that gap and have that information on hand and ready for, ready to give out to their customers as needed.
True.
Ashley, we've talked a little bit about the impact of COVID over the last year, and obviously a lot changed in a lot of different spheres of related to food, whether it was, food delivery instead of, getting as much in restaurant, which again, its own whole thing, because I don't know how many times you've ordered something that, came to your house a little bit lukewarm, not quite as hot as it would be fresh out of the kitchen. The driver told you they had to make 3 other stops on their way to you, and you kind of get a little sketchy about what did I just get? that, curbside delivery, online shopping, you go pick something up from your local grocery store. How long ago did they pick that stuff? How long has it been sitting in the staging area? Did they keep it in a freezer that time? So there's a lot of stuff I think that people got concerned about around food, as related to, to COVID. And on top of the fact that we all just learned how to think more critically about viruses and bacteria anyway. Is there anything we've missed that COVID kind of changed in the game of food safety over the last year? Anything else we should be talking about?
What I think I would call out two things. One is, and it goes back to this heightened consumer awareness. Zebra actually just recently did a blog post on this, is that no one really knew or really understood about the cold chain before COVID started, right? And then all of a sudden, 60 Minutes has a thing on the cold chain, and there's YouTube videos about the cold chain. There's suddenly all of this interest because the vaccines themselves were being transported via the cold chain. And suddenly people realized, oh, right, I buy all of these things that are completely refrigerated. I wonder how they're getting from point A to point B. So you've had this heightened awareness suddenly of the supply chain that no one really ever, I don't think, really thought before. So I now have awareness of the cold chain as a sort of a layperson. And second of all, I can't buy paper towels, right? So there was this huge awareness of the supply chain because there was these shortages, right? And shortages of some of the favorite foods that we wanted to purchase, right? And that pushed us to buy things locally, that pushed us to change in a lot of different ways. Suddenly it wasn't just paper towels or toilet paper, it was mac and cheese. It was a lot of staples that had come into shortages in certain areas of the country. So everyone became, I think, much more aware of how long food lasts and how long it can be kept and all of those different things. So just really hyper aware of all of that because of the pandemic, right? When you're kind of locked in your house and you suddenly have to clean out your cabinets, or you're wondering if you should be buying things in bulk and how long they last. These all, I think, changed those mindsets. The other thing is that we did start to get everything in delivery. So that's the second piece, is that suddenly, there were a couple of 100,000 delivery, food orders, and it now is into the millions. And if you think about 1 million bags of food, and one of those bags per every 5 is going to be a refrigerated bag with dairies, meats, cheeses, milk, anything that you can pretty much think of, vegetables, you are going to wonder about how that's being kept. And if I go to pick up my things, is there a data logger in that tote and it's monitoring that? How long has that shopper been walking around with their cart before I get all of my groceries? Do I understand that timing? And that's, again, that heightened awareness that it's not just expiry dates that are fueling that. And it's not just understanding that it came from my local dairy, right? I really want to know that it's been kept at the appropriate temperature or humidity or whatever condition that it's supposed to be in. So by the time it makes it to me, it's at that level of quality, and it's going to last the longest, right? It might take me a couple of days to polish off that gallon of milk. So I think that hyper awareness with the consumers is definitely something, again, to talk about to all of the different businesses that are serving them. You can turn that around to be a selling point. You can turn that around to be something that differentiates you in the marketplace, and take advantage of all of this learning that all of the consumers have finally done, and really kind of set their mind at ease when doing delivery, when doing buy online, pick up in store, even again, doing shipments of food when you're shipping them across country.
Yep, that's it.
French style green beans. That was the odd food that I could not find for months during the beginning of the pandemic.
French style
green beans. I just wanted a green
Who's
bean casserole.
looking for these, first off?
I was,
apparently you.
Yeah.
And
I couldn't get
a couple other people?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, a green bean casserole. Come on. That's all I wanted.
Yeah.
I eat that one time a year during Thanksgiving. That's it.
Yes.
True.
Yes.
Typically I do too, but sometimes I might do it twice.
Okay. So. All right. Fair enough.
So I completely agree. And it is interesting to see that this correlation between like supply chain issues and food safety and how the two kind of walk hand in hand, which again is another reason why I feel like our audience and our resellers should be thinking about, hey, if I'm already trying to help out with the supply chain problem, I need to be thinking about the safety issue side of it too. Mm-hmm. Before we get into the technology side of this and some of the nitty gritty on the technology that can put into play, I did want to talk briefly about food waste as well and trying to reduce food waste. I feel like it's one of those topics that we talk about and talk about and talk about it, and never seem to come up with a really great solution for it. Everybody's mother at some point told them, all that thing you're not eating could have fed some poor starving child somewhere else in the world.
Yes, right.
And beyond that, and just the massive amounts of food we waste, the stat I came across here, which was very alarming, about 1/3, 1.3 billion tons of food produced globally for human consumption gets wasted every year, enough to feed 690 million who go hungry. That is a depressing stat if I've ever seen one in my life.
Yeah, right.
And I know at some point we're all guilty of it sometimes, of dumping something out that is,
Oh, sure.
relatively good or could have been good if we hadn't let it go and ate it sooner. But so, Ashley, from your point of view, how does focusing on food safety and even before we get into the specific technology, how does this help us with reduction of food waste? What are we talking about with this right now?
Yeah, I think that the food trusts and a lot of the companies, there's a very large retailer who looked at what would happen if we could just extend the life of an avocado, for example, for just one day. And that would be appropriately monitoring it, appropriately, refrigerating it and making sure that it was going to stay in a sellable form, right? So this is the other thing, it was going to stay sellable, for one extra day. And it reduced a huge amount of waste because it just allowed that avocado to be able to stay out on the floor just for a little bit longer, just enough for it to get purchased. So I think maintaining, again, all of those temperatures and maintaining that quality, that an environment that all the food is in is very, very important in terms of whether or not you waste it or not. Because most of the time people are wasting it, again, not necessarily on expiry date. They're looking at it, right? They're looking at it and they're saying, right. I'm not going to buy it, or it's ugly. I need to discount it, half, and I need to get it out of the stores, as quickly as possible. And you'll always have those folks who will be like, oh yeah, I'll buy the day old strawberries or the bananas are going brown because I'm going to make a pie or I'm going to make bread or whatever it is. And I'm happy to purchase those. But what oftentimes happens is what we talked about is that it gets wasted. And again, it's beyond just the expiration date. We want to make sure that we can have these foods safely as long as possible. So the better that we can monitor them and the better we can understand what's happening in our supply chain. And this goes to that techie answer of, the more I know where my trucks are, the more I know where, there could be slowdowns in the supply chain, where there's weather elements and other types of environmental things that are happening. I can route my trucks. I can maybe have the goods go to a different location that is going to be closer in and is going to allow me to sell things more quickly. Looking at all this data connection is going to help us, again, not waste as much food. And the more and more that we can do, again, environmentally, with how that food is being processed, the better off we will, because it will look better, it will feel better, it will taste better, and people will be a lot less likely to throw it away.
I like that this idea of helping everyone understand where there might be a gap and knowing, like you said, where the trucks are at all times, for instance. It reminded me of, you and I both started trying out the whole, home kits, home chef kits and everything, HelloFresh and Blue Apron. I became a big fan of it in the past year, and I turned you onto it at some point too. And I remember one day getting one of my deliveries from one of the two. I don't remember which one it was because I'm kind of mixing and matching them. One of them came like a day later than it was supposed to. Like it was supposed to deliver on one date, and there was some bad weather, I think, in the Chicago area or something that delayed them a day. They did deliver it the next day, but then I got an email from them saying, hey, we're going to refund you on this particular shipment. It's a day late. Feel free to throw the food out if you want. We're sorry that this came later than usual. Now, mind you, it still was cold in the packaging. The ice pack was still solid. I mean, unless they left it sitting out somewhere and then refroze it and I just didn't know any different, everything was fine. I cooked it all up. I used it all. It was fine. Everything tasted great. I had no issues whatsoever. But that was something that made me think, though, man, that's kind of depressing to think that and I get why they're doing it. They don't want any of the liability if for some reason something did go wrong because of that extra day that it was out there in the delivery phase that it wasn't supposed to be. But it occurred to me like, man, there's got to be a better way to make sure that either this doesn't happen or to feel more confident about hey, what we delivered you is still perfectly fine. You're still okay to go. You shouldn't have to worry about this. You're good. And I think maybe that's where some of this technology can kind of help us out a little bit. Which, hey,
I can't wait until it gets to the package level that.
I
That would
agree.
be really cool.
I
Yes, this
completely
package,
agree.
this is the journey that this package went on getting to your house. It was at these temperatures at this time.
Not just the giant shipment, but just down to the individual package.
Yeah, I don't. Are we going to get there someday, Ashley? You think where it's like down?
I think that we're probably closer than you think. There's
There you
many
go.
ways.
See?
There's many ways chemically that we can do that to drive confidence with indicators, the chemical indicators that will say, yep, this package actually, in fact, did stay cold enough. And you're absolutely right. All of those packaging folks who do such a great job to say, yep, the contents of this are going to stay the right temperature for 24 to 48 hours. We have lots of good technology that helps us to drive that. And we call it full life technology when we start to put some of those pieces on or indicators on at the start. So at the manufacturing point, and then you can see them throughout their journey. The next stage of that is capturing that information, right? So whether we're capturing it through machine vision, so we have the chemical interaction and it's saying, the tag is red, which means don't eat it, or the tag is white, maybe I can capture that with cameras. There's all sorts of different things in terms of how we record all of that data and get that to the end user so that they can, again, feel that the quality is very high and they can trust the food that they're getting.
Awesome.
Yeah, very cool.
Well, then, since we've kind of started this whole, down the road of technology, let's talk about what are some of the key technologies that are involved in food safety. What do we need to be thinking about? What should our VARs be thinking about as this FDA guidance, these proposed rules are making their way through the chain and, where we feel like, hey, some of this stuff probably is going to happen. What kind of technologies do we need to be thinking about and already planning for, maybe even already talking up with customers? And, as an addendum to that, tell us a little bit about what Zebra's doing right now and what kind of technologies you're introducing and putting out there or already have in place to help combat these food safety issues as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that with the coming, the new era pieces, you look at sort of two different things. One is you look at where, right? So from a traceability standpoint, where has it been? How do I get the data to understand where something has been, right? I'm always curious as to where my dog walks off to, right? There's little tags that you can put on your pets now and you can see where they've gone, right? So that's where. But the condition of the item is all those different other pieces of data that you really need to understand from in terms of a quality and safety perspective. And that's where we're really starting to see the data take off, because the where can be done by an RFID tag. It can be done from a scanning perspective. I have scanned this into a particular location. You can have a BLE tag that can, be read and you can consume that information. It's a silo where you consume the information, but at least you can get that data at some point. I know that pallet A has crossed the threshold and is now in this distribution center, right? And I know it's being broken up into these different pieces that are all individually tagged. They're going to go back on a different pallet. So pallet B might have one case on it and off it's going to go to a store. But I can read those things individually inside the four walls and I can understand when they get it to the other end. What we're seeing now, and more of these technologies to think about and look at, are all of the data logging that is happening in between all of those different spots and how to look at that. So there are BLE data loggers. There's different kinds of data loggers that are logging both location and temperature. There's loggers that are, can tell you if something has had a shock, humidity. There's a lot of these different environmental sensing. And that's what's now being layered into all of these different networks. So you have the very traditional data loggers that are part of each truck. And then you now have all these different kind of data loggers that are going to be in the pallets, in the boxes, on top of all of these things that are moving around. And you get to record all of that as it's going along. So not only do individual distributors have like control towers with this data, but all of that data is going to start to be basically democratized so that it can go back and forth. And we truly can understand, from that supplier, the supplier gets broken up, into different pieces, and how does it end up at different kinds of stores and all the way to you. Going back to your example of I've received my prepared foods in a box, and I really want to understand where all of those ingredients were sourced from. We'll be able to get a nice data sheet that could possibly show that. So that's where the FDA is really going, and they're going for that cultural element as to how to share all that data, right? So not only do we need to record it through all of these tags and systems, but how do we actually share all of that, and where are those investments into sharing? Where are those data investments where this analytics, the tasking, the other pieces, actionable data, how are we going to make investments there to make sure that we can, again, see it across all the different companies. Because I, as an end user, I buy lots of different things from lots of different people, and I expect that the level of service from all of those different providers.
You know, this reminds me a little bit of when we're talking about this traceability all the way down to the individual components. It reminds me of the cannabis industry.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which
is there. They're there now.
They're doing that already, where you've got to track everything. If you snip a piece off of a bud, you know, if you take a cut off of something, you got to be tracking and tracing every tiny little piece as it moves along there. And I find it interesting that that industry, which is still fledgling, all things considered, and that we're slowly figuring out, you know, how to do this stuff as it continues to grow, it could easily be the model for what we could potentially do on the food side of things.
Absolutely.
But it would be a massive undertaking, I'm sure, obviously, because that's, you know,
it would be. You've got a lot
that
of
granular
legacy.
detail that, you know, is in place for a reason, and it's one thing to do that from the get-go and starting off in an industry than a massive multi-trillion-dollar, I'm sure, industry as food is actually. So, well then, Ashley, you know, let's wrap up then with the second part of that question, which was, you know, what's Zebra doing right now? Tell us about some of the technology and some of the solutions that you have in place around food safety.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to say one more thing about what you just said about cannabis, though, and the ROI of these solutions, because I'll talk about that in terms of what Zebra is doing. Is that when you think about putting RFID tag something, or you think about some of these extra steps, a lot of people's antenna go up and say, well, that's going to make it more costly. Why, or how could I speak about that so that it's not just, you know, a mandate that's making me do it? How do I make sure that this is going to prove ROI? One of the great things about the services and a lot of the solutions that Zebra offers is that we can show you how that return on investment will help all of your different customers. We can show you how RFID can help you to track things more accurately and how that comes through, because we now have ways to aggregate and show that data. There's a lot of different components that are now being, you know, integrated together to help provide those more connected solutions. So Zebra is doing a wide variety of things. One is that we have we have Bluetooth temperature data loggers that are now any reseller can come in and sell that, and it has software with it as well to give you an alert from a mobile device or an email to say something is going wrong with the temperature. The temperature is going too high. You should stop the truck. You should move the box. You should move the pallet. It'll help, you know, again, on that ROI, help you to reduce, you know, waste of food and chemicals and anything else that you're transporting, as well as, you know, protect it to make sure that it isn't going into the danger zone, those high temperatures for too long. So that's one great thing that we're just recently working on. A number of other inside the four walls. MotionWorks, obviously, and RFID is helping to locate and understand, making sure that we know exactly where each one of those, you know, cases and items are. Ensuring that they're in the right spot, ensuring that you can actually understand that even in your refrigerations and different large distribution centers, and all of our print and mobile computers as well, in terms of helping out, in terms of matching up all the transportation data that's coming in and the warehouse data to make sure that everything is going in the correct direction. Big project that we worked just recently on was a very large food distributor in the QSR space, and we brought together 6 or 7 different kinds of technologies and partners to help them to understand the traceability from all of their different suppliers all the way to their end users, their franchise restaurants. And that was a fantastic project. We'd love to talk to more partners about how we did that and how they could benefit.
Awesome.
Yeah, what I like about Zebra is is it Savannah? Do you wrap some of this up under Savannah, the Savannah Works, if you will? Yes. Which is like,
so MotionWorks.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's what I was going to say. The MotionWorks, and you got data services under there. I really think Zebra is doing a good job of really kind of focusing and helping the resellers, because, you know, a lot of it comes down to the data manipulation, the software end of it. You need some help there, right? I mean, our resellers are really good with hardware. They understand hardware, you know, but it's the software piece that I think that Zebra is doing a really good job with. And I don't understand it completely, but, you know, the whole Savannah Works and what you guys are doing there is to help bridge that gap, correct? To help them along.
It is. I think what it really speaks to, though, is the value, right? So the value is in the data, right? So there's this wonderful thing about, selling the RFID readers and selling the mobile computers, but it is the data that is being generated. How can we manipulate and show the value of that, the solution, the problem that we're actually solving? And that's, what Zebra Savannah and the data services has been all about. And again, we're really starting to see that come through, where the resellers can take all of that data, they can come up with those solutions, they can lead with that value versus just it's the fastest one on the market or it's the most rugged on the market. Well, that's a wonderful value statement and value proposition, but we want to take that even higher to say, well, we can help you to connect all of these different systems together and provide a whole other level of innovation.
Absolutely. And we talk about the edge, right? All these solutions, a lot of what we've been talking about here is all stuff that's on the edge. There's nothing more on the edge than a little sensor on a box that's on a truck way out in Wisconsin or something like that, right? But I think, yeah, right. To Ashley's point, I really do think that that's a good way, the whole Savannah system is, or in knowing about that and understanding it is going to get you that other critical piece to the whole solution. So,
and I love the ROI aspect of this too. I like that she mentioned this fact that, if you've got a customer that's reticent about getting involved in this, and they're going, that sounds pricey to me. We're doing fine. We don't really need to mess with this. We're okay. That FDA stuff probably is years down the road.
Right. Yeah.
It is awesome when you can go back to them and say, hey, we're working with Zebra. They've crunched the numbers. They've got the data. I will show you exactly how this will benefit your business. I think that's super important to be able to do. So, well, Ashley, thank you so much for this conversation. Before we move on to our recurring segments, I do want to, as always, thank our TEConnect members, of which Zebra is one. Thank you so much for your support of our show. We could not do this without you, and for giving us Ashley to talk to today.
There you go.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Right.
As always, if you first of all, if you like the show, please, if you're a subscriber or if you're watching us on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's all kinds of other fun, cool stuff that BlueStar is always doing there that you can check out. If you're listening to an audio podcast, especially if you're on Apple, leave us a 5-star rating and review. We'd love to hear from you.
It's easy to do.
If you have ideas or suggestions for future episodes, this I thought was a nice, different kind of discussion from what we've done before. If you have topics you want to hear about, reach out to us. You can find us on Twitter at TEConnectPod. You can also email us, TEConnect@BlueStarInc.com. All right, let's wrap things up, as always, with our recurring segments. First is our value to the VAR. This is where we kind of try to wrap our conversation up in a nice little package.
But there's been so much today.
There has. And there's honestly, I know there's a lot more we could get into as well. But, again, for someone who's trying to wrap their mind around this, who maybe has not really thought about messing with the food safety side of things and where they could make an impact. Ashley, tell us, where do you think is a good place to start with positioning this technology? Who should we be talking to? Is it, if you're working with grocery stores, do you just talk to regional managers? Are you going to the top of the company? Are you talking to individual restaurants? Like, who do we talk to? Where do we go? And where do we start to have these conversations?
Well, it's great that you ask that, because when we think about this, what we keeps coming up is quality, right? And every QSR, retailer, anyone who has to deal with food always has a quality control team. And there's not folks that get spoken to very often, but they're usually in the background saying, I know all the regulations, I know all the mitigation plans, I'm writing the standard operating procedures and dictating or understanding the technology on how we satisfy all those regulations and those operating procedures. So you really want to talk to those quality folks. They're in every distribution center, they're in every food service, they're in every retailer. And what they're going to do is they're going to trickle all that down to your regional managers and your store managers. They're all going to have those standard operating procedures. They're going to all have that education that they have to have. That quality group is going to be driving all of that. And they're techie people. They really are. They want to talk about technology. They love being, included. And ultimately, there's going to be an operations executive who is going to take their advice, right? Is going to take their advice and make that buying decision. So I would highly encourage starting different conversations with the quality people, try to map those out, try to figure out who they are. They're going to open up a whole other world to you in terms of what you can sell.
And there it is, right there. There's the opportunity. I mean, if we haven't convinced you yet that there is an opportunity that can you imagine a millennial not like wanting to know where their cabbage came from? No. I mean, they're going to want to know that, or if their vaccine, was properly transported the entire way. I know we didn't get into that here today, but it's happening. It's a cultural thing. There's heightened awareness around all this stuff now with the pandemic. So what does all that paint? It paints a picture of opportunity. So yeah, I would advocate with resellers, understand some of these technologies, understand what the needs are coming for the marketplace, understand that the FDA is going to get behind it with some regulations and some rules that people are going to have to start abiding by. There's opportunity for you right there.
Well, and I think also it comes down to when you're in front of a customer is asking a very simple question of, hey, can your brand, can your business handle something happening? If there's a recall, it has to go out tomorrow. And how often do we see these recalls from big companies? Hey, we're recalling all of these units of this particular type of food because of a relatively minor problem that might have occurred, but still, no one wants to find plastic in their bread, or stuff like that. That kind of stuff, like that can lead to millions of dollars of loss for a company. And then you get, as we talked about earlier, you get down to the granular level, just to your local restaurant. One person gets sick or a group of people get sick because of some bad fish that was served one night. Could have a huge impact on your business all the way up to you having to close your doors. So I think that's a great question.
The stat, real quick, by the way. The average cost of a food-related recall, $10 million.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
That's insane.
That's insane.
It is.
Yeah. So
that's good for spinach.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yes,
it could be for the simplest thing. So I think that's, I know we talk about like not selling with fear, but it's a way of at least putting that out there. And we talk about this on cybersecurity sometimes. Like, are you prepared to deal with the consequences of a breach? Are you prepared to deal with the consequences of a recall of an entire line of your food products, or the consequences of a couple customers getting sick today and what that's going to do to your business? I think that's sometimes how you can kind of start that conversation. Like, hey, do you know what happens about maybe throwing that stat out there and saying, hey, do you know what the cost of the recall is?
It's not doom and gloom. It's reality, right?
Exactly.
It's a reality type check. Yeah,
exactly. So, all right, good stuff. Well, hey, let's wrap up with our favorite segment of each week, which is What's Tech Connecting with You?
Absolutely.
This is where we get to talk about something from the world of technology, science, innovation, and gadgets. Anything that's kind of caught our attention this week. So, Ashley, I'll let you start. What's tech connecting with you right now?
Well, amazingly enough, it's actually, temperature and other related stuff. The coolest thing I've seen lately is that there was, and it's very big brother, but I thought it was great, was that I looked at, there was a pharmaceutical pill that you take, and it actually tells a mobile application that you've taken your pill. Now, I know that sounds creepy. And I know it sounds weird for me to like that, but I have a parent who has dementia. Yep. I would love to know that he took his medication. That would be fantastic. That helps him keep healthy, reduces my stress. I thought it was great. But again, I know it's a little weird for me to talk about, but I think technology, that's where it's going, right? Is to try to solve these problems where people, they definitely need the help. And how do we figure out how to help them, right?
That was literally the first thing I thought of. As soon as you said that, I was thinking, man, that's perfect for somebody with dementia, for elderly patients, somebody who is on a large, regimen of medications or something and needs to make sure they take
maybe
things.
They have like 6 to take, right? Like,
yeah. Honestly, there are days I could use that. I mean, just to keep track of, hey, did I take my vitamin today? Did I take, this or that? That's very important stuff. I like it.
Well, the whole sensing. I mean, I continue to be mesmerized by, the stuff that Zebra's doing, or that you just see out in the market. Place I just think there's going to be a windfall of that, the usage of these types of technologies, so that people can understand what's going on. And to your point, Ashley, in this case, help mitigating the stress level of family members. I mean, healthcare, we've talked a lot about healthcare and how the technology is going to be implemented there. Yeah, so that's not going away.
Nope,
it ain't going anywhere.
Dean, what's tech connecting with you?
All right, so what are the perfect number of hours to work every day? Well, okay, I know what your standard answer is going to be. Ashley, what's your standard answer there? 10? Oh, 10. Okay, she's going to, well, by the way, you have Ford.
6 is good.
6 you think is good? You have Ford to thank for the 8-hour workday. I did not know this, but they kind of standardized the 8-hour workday.
Which now, mind you, was an improvement, because before they, these companies
you think
were
it was
forcing
an improvement?
They were forcing people to work 10, 12,
in that
16
particular
hours.
Case. Yes. All right. Well, actually, the way they framed it in this article wasn't so much of an improvement, because it's so that Ford could keep the plant going 24 hours a day, and so they had to kind of
cycling the shifts. Oh, I'm sure there was a good business sense behind it. But
as it turns out, the perfect amount of hours to work in a day is 5.
Okay.
There you go.
I can get behind that.
5. They did some studies, and they did kind of the stress testing on both sides, and they found out that when people try to do all their work in a 4-hour workday, it becomes way too stressful because people are just trying to cram in their tasks. They broke it down to like 15-minute tasks.
4 hours goes by pretty quickly sometimes.
It goes by too fast, and then people are feeling way too stressed out at the end of it. I'm not getting my stuff done and blah, blah, blah type of a thing. But, this one particular study said, hey, 5-hour workday is where you need to be. So I don't know. I'm intrigued by that number, and I don't know if it's going to be a quality of life. We're coming out of this whole pandemic thing, right? Everybody's talking about working from home and how many hours, but research indicates that 5 hours is about the maximum that most of us can concentrate hard on something.
So you're gonna go pitch that to the BlueStar execs, right?
Well, no, not at all. I'm just throwing it on the table.
I think I was actually off a couple hours ago. Sorry, we gotta end this podcast.
Yeah, we're done here.
I'm in overtime now. I like it. I think that's cool.
There you go. Anyway, what's Tech Connecting with you?
Mine is kind of one of these entertaining times when a startup company tells us, that they can do something, and you get a peek behind the curtain and realize, no, they actually cannot and did not. So a company called Nikola, which I find interesting because this is a company that makes self-driving vehicles.
Okay.
Like Nikola Tesla, who Tesla's named after.
Yes, of course.
So back in 2016, they rolled out plans for a self-driving truck, like a semi-truck, an actual LTL type truck.
Yep.
And they put out this awesome video of this truck, self-driving down a road or whatever by itself, and everybody was all excited about it. They got all kinds of investment opportunities, started, raising all kinds of funds to get off the ground. Well, one investment company in particular was doing their due diligence and went a little behind the scenes and did a little poking around and found out that video was in some way sort of faked. They actually put the truck on a low-grade hill and let it coast down the hill.
Really?
And filmed it. Now, Nikola, the company, has since said, well, we never said that it was actually driving under its own propulsion. We never claimed that.
Oh, good Lord.
The video heavily implied that.
Right?
I remember seeing this video, actually. It was very heavily implied.
This is our truck.
They certainly didn't tell you that it wasn't operating under its own propulsion.
It wasn't in the little legalese at the end.
There was nothing in there.
Okay.
So they built all this funding off of it. They're actually already working on like the Nikola 2 or whatever to replace it.
A bigger hill that they're going to roll it down?
But I think now they've actually got some bigger companies like working with them to create real vehicles that actually can do this. But still, it's just one of those times when you don't get too excited about what you see that some new startup is telling you they can do, because it's a great world out there where you can manipulate things and make people think something and invest in something that's kind of shadowy at this point. It reminds me of the whole Theranos thing that Elizabeth Holmes did years ago, with the blood stuff, and tricked the whole world into thinking this new revolution, and in reality it was smoke and mirrors.
And he's nothing but a snake oil salesman.
Yeah, exactly.
They're still around.
Yep, they still are. All right, Ashley Barey from Zebra, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate having you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I've had a great time.
Us too. But unfortunately, it is time for us to unplug. So until next time, sniff all your food, make sure none of it's gone bad, and stay connected. Thanks, everybody. Hey, everybody. Since we just talked all about food safety and the technology behind it, it's the perfect time to talk about Zebra's electronic temperature sensors. Pharmaceuticals, biologic, and food products require strict control of environmental parameters, temperature range, humidity level, light exposure, and more, not only to satisfy compliance, but also to protect product effectiveness and end-user safety. Introducing a new product line from Zebra Technologies, electronic temperature sensors. With Zebra's temperature monitoring and sensing devices, your customers can ensure the integrity and cost-effectiveness of their temperature-sensitive products during storage, shipping, and handling. Their devices monitor environmental exposures critical to maintaining the quality of your customers' products in biotech, blood banks, emergency medical service, other healthcare organizations, as well as food distribution and delivery. To learn more about this exciting new field-tested product line, check out the link in the show notes to find plenty of helpful resources and application briefs.